The first night I heard it, I convinced myself it was the building settling. Old Victorian houses make noise, everyone knows that. Floorboards contract in the cold, pipes knock against the walls, and sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, you hear footsteps when there shouldn't be any. I needed this apartment. After the divorce, my options had dwindled to either moving back with my parents at 34 or finding somewhere cheap enough that I could afford it on a teacher's salary. When Mrs. Harmon showed me the third-floor unit with its slanted ceilings and cracked bathroom tiles, I signed the lease immediately. The fact that I would be sharing a wall with another tenant barely registered as a concern. Daniel keeps to himself, Mrs. Harmon had said, her arthritic fingers struggling with the ancient lock. Been here 7 years. Works nights, sleeps days. You'll hardly know he exists. She was right about that, at least in the beginning. I never saw Daniel, only heard the occasional shuffle of movement through our shared wall around 8 p.m. when he presumably woke up, and then again at dawn when he returned. Our schedules were perfectly misaligned. I left for school before he got home and was asleep before he woke. But 2 weeks after moving in, I found something odd when I came home from work. My nightstand drawer was slightly open. Just a quarter inch, but I was meticulous about such things. When I checked inside, nothing seemed to be missing, yet everything felt touched. My journal lay at a different angle. The pen I always kept capped was uncapped. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. The stress of the move, the new job, the divorce. Anyone would be scattered. Then my laptop went missing. I'd left it on the kitchen table that morning but returned to find it placed neatly on my bed. Had I moved it there before leaving and forgotten? I started to doubt my own memory. That night, I woke suddenly at 3:17 a.m. according to my phone. Something had startled me awake, a sound maybe. I lay perfectly still, listening to the silence of the old house until it wasn't silent anymore. From the other side of the wall came the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping against the floor, followed by a soft thud. My neighbor was awake, which was strange considering Mrs. Harmon said he worked nights. I pressed my ear against the wall, and heard something that made my skin prickle, the muffled sound of my own voice. It was faint but unmistakable, me, talking to my mother on the phone earlier that day, complaining about my ex-husband's latest attempt to reduce alimony payments. Sleep evaded me for the rest of the night. In the morning I examined my apartment with fresh eyes. There were no visible cameras that I could find, no obvious holes in the walls or ceiling. But when I pulled back my shower curtain, I noticed something on the tile wall, a tiny black speck near the ceiling that hadn't been there before. I called in sick to work and drove to an electronics store, where I purchased a bug detector. Back home, I swept every inch of my apartment. The device remained silent until I reached the bathroom, where it emitted a shrill beep as I passed it over the ceiling vent. The shower fixture also triggered an alert. 2 cameras, at least. My hands trembled as I dialed Mrs. Harmon's number. "Oh, Daniel handles all the maintenance for the building," she told me when I asked about the bathroom vent. "He's quite handy. Replaced that himself last month after the old one rusted through." That night, I stayed with a coworker and filed a police report. The officers who took my statement seemed concerned but not alarmed. No evidence of a break-in, nothing stolen, no threats made. They promised to speak with Daniel and Mrs. Harmon but cautioned me that without more concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. When I returned to my apartment the next day after the police visit, the black speck in the shower was gone. The bug detector no longer beeped at the vent. In fact, it didn't register anything at all anymore, as if my apartment had been thoroughly cleared. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt watched more intensely than ever. That evening I heard Daniel leave for work through the thin walls. 10 minutes after his heavy footsteps descended the stairs, there was a knock at my door. Mrs. Harmon stood in the hallway, her silver hair pulled back in its usual tight bun, her expression pinched with concern. "The police came by," she said, her voice lower than usual. "Asked about Daniel. I've never had the police in my building before. I'm sorry for the trouble," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But someone installed cameras in my apartment." She looked genuinely confused. Cameras? Why would anyone want to watch you? The way she said it, like I wasn't worth watching, made something shift in my perception. Would you like to come in for tea? I asked impulsively. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded and followed me inside. As the kettle boiled, I noticed how her eyes darted around my apartment, lingering on certain spots: the bookshelf, the air vent in the living room, the light fixture above the kitchen table. How long have you owned this building, Mrs. Harmon? I asked, setting a mug before her. 42 years. My husband left it to me when he passed. And Daniel? You said he's been here 7 years? She nodded, sipping her tea. A godsend, that man. I couldn't manage the upkeep at my age. He does everything: plumbing, electrical, even refinished the floors in the downstairs unit last year. In exchange for reduced rent? I asked. Oh no, she said, her lips curling into a smile. Daniel pays nothing at all. I slid down my spine. Nothing? We have an arrangement. She set her mug down with a decisive clink. You know, you really shouldn't have called the police. Daniel is very private. He was upset. I don't care if he was upset. He put cameras in my bathroom. Mrs. Harmon's face hardened. You have no proof of that. The police found nothing, she interrupted. Because there was nothing to find. I stood up, suddenly aware of how alone we were in the apartment. I think you should leave. She remained seated. Do you know why I rented to you specifically? The question caught me off guard. Because I could pay the deposit? Mrs. Harmon laughed, a dry sound like leaves scraping concrete. I had 17 applicants for this unit. Many with better credit than yours. She leaned forward. Daniel chose you. From all the applications. He said you would be perfect. I backed away from the table. What does that mean? She stood slowly, her arthritic movements deliberate. It means, my dear, that Daniel likes to watch. And I like to help him. She glanced at her watch. He's not actually at work tonight. That was for your benefit. He thought you might be more comfortable thinking he wasn't here. I lunged for my phone on the counter, but Mrs. Harmon was surprisingly quick. Her bony fingers wrapped around my wrist. He's watching right now, she whispered, her breath sour against my face. He's always watching. I yanked my arm free and ran for the door, only to find it wouldn't open. The deadbolt I'd never used was engaged, and I didn't have the key. Daniel installed new locks last week. Mrs. Harmon called from behind me. After you moved in. For your protection, he said. A sound from the shared wall made us both turn, 3 distinct knocks. Mrs. Harmon's face brightened. He wants to meet you properly, she said. Isn't that nice? After all this time watching, he wants to say hello. I backed against the door, frantically turning the useless knob. Let me out. Oh, don't be dramatic. Daniel is shy, that's all. Once you get to know him, you'll understand our arrangement. I'll scream, I threatened. The nearest neighbor is half a mile away, she replied calmly. Besides, the walls are quite soundproof. Daniel made sure of that when he renovated. The knocking came again, more insistent. He's waiting, Mrs. Harmon said. It's rude to keep him waiting when he's been so patient with you. My gaze darted around the apartment, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. The windows were too small to climb through, and we were 3 stories up anyway. My eyes fell on the kitchen knife block. Mrs. Harmon followed my gaze and smiled. Go ahead. Make it interesting for him. That's when I realized she wanted me to fight back. They both did. It was part of the show. Instead of running for the knives, I walked to the center of the room and sat down cross-legged on the floor. What are you doing? Mrs. Harmon asked, confused. Nothing, I replied. Absolutely nothing. Get up, she demanded. Daniel is waiting to meet you. I stayed seated. If Daniel wants to meet me, he can come in here himself. Mrs. Harmon's face contorted with anger. That's not how this works. You go to him. No. She moved toward me, her frail frame suddenly menacing. "You don't understand. This is what you're here for." "I'm here because I signed a lease," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Nothing more. The knocking on the wall had stopped. In its place came a new sound, something being dragged across the floor on the other side. Mrs. Harmon's eyes widened with what looked like fear. "Now you've done it," she whispered. "He doesn't like change." We both stared at the wall, waiting. Minutes passed in silence. Then, from the hallway outside my apartment came the sound of a key in a lock. My door swung open. I scrambled to my feet, ready to run, but froze at the sight in the doorway. A police officer stood there, looking confused. "Door was unlocked," he said. "Ms. Reed? We got a call from your cell phone." Behind him stood my ex-husband, his face pale. "The police called me as your emergency contact," he explained. "Said you dialed 911 but weren't responding." I looked around wildly. Mrs. Harmon was gone. Had she ever been there at all? The officer stepped into my apartment. "Ma'am, are you all right? You reported someone named Daniel was stalking you?" "He lives next door," I said, pointing at the wall. "And Mrs. Harmon, the landlady, she's working with him." The officer exchanged a glance with my ex. "Ma'am, according to county records, you own this building. You purchased it 3 months ago." "That's impossible," I whispered. "There is no Mrs. Harmon registered at this address," he continued. "And the unit next door has been vacant for years." My ex-husband stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Emily, you bought this place with your inheritance after your mother died. Don't you remember? The judge awarded you the divorce settlement because of my indiscretions. You decided to become a landlady instead of going back to teaching." I shook my head violently. "No, that's not right. I'm a tenant here. I just moved in 2 weeks ago." The officer moved toward the wall I shared with Daniel and pressed his ear against it. "There's definitely someone moving around in there," he said, drawing his weapon. "Stay behind me." He tried the door to the adjacent apartment and found it unlocked. Pushing it open, he swept his flashlight across the dark space. I peered around his shoulder and gasped. The apartment was empty except for a chair facing a wall covered in monitors. Each screen showed a different angle of my apartment: my kitchen, my living room, my bedroom, my bathroom. On a small table beside the chair sat a voice modulator and a stack of rental applications with mine on top, circled in red. And pinned to the wall above the monitors, dozens of photographs of me, sleeping, showering, crying, eating, dating back not 2 weeks, but 7 years. "There's no one here," the officer said, sweeping his light into the corners. "But we'll dust for prints." My ex-husband put his arm around my shoulders. "Emily, when was the last time you took your medication?" I stepped away from him. "What medication?" His eyes were sad. "After the incident. The doctors said you might create scenarios. People who aren't real." I backed away from both of them. "I'm not crazy. Daniel is real. Mrs. Harmon is real. Mrs. Harmon was the previous owner," the officer said gently. "She died 7 years ago. You mentioned that name in your previous episodes." I looked around the empty apartment with its wall of surveillance equipment. If there was no Daniel, who had set this up? Who had been watching me? A horrible thought began to form. "The cameras," I whispered. "They're still transmitting. Look." I pointed at the live feed showing my apartment from angles that matched perfectly with where the officer and my ex were standing. The officer frowned and stepped closer to the monitors. "This is unusual." My ex-husband's grip on my shoulder tightened painfully. "Emily," he said, his voice different now, harder. "It's time to go home." I turned to look at him and noticed for the first time the dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't shaved in days. And there, just visible beneath his collar, was a black cord attached to something small and flesh-colored in his ear. The officer's radio crackled. "All units be advised. We have no record of a dispatch to 1429 Linden Street." The man who wasn't an officer stared at me, his hand moving slowly toward his weapon. "Daniel?" I whispered. My ex-husband's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Not exactly," he said. "But close enough." The knot officer turned toward us. 7 years I've been watching," he said in a voice that wasn't his own, a voice that sounded eerily like Mrs. Harmon's. 7 years waiting for you to be perfect." I backed toward the door as both men advanced on me, their movements synchronized as if controlled by the same mind. "You created quite the performance for us tonight," my ex said, still smiling that empty smile. "But the show must go on." As I turned to run, I caught a glimpse of one of the monitors. In the grainy footage, I was alone in the empty apartment, backing away from nothing, my face contorted in terror. And I realized then that Daniel, whoever or whatever he was, had been right about one thing. I was perfect for this place. Because I'd been watching myself all along. I should have known something was wrong when I found my toothbrush moved 3 inches to the left. It's the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but after living alone for 7 years, you develop a certain awareness of your space. The bristles were still damp. I hadn't used it since that morning. My name is Alex, and I'd been searching for a roommate for nearly 2 months when Megan responded to my ad. The rent in Portland had skyrocketed, and my bartending job couldn't cover it anymore. When she walked into my apartment for the viewing, her smile was warm, her references impeccable. A pediatric nurse working at Oregon Health and Science University, she explained she just moved from Seattle and needed a place immediately. "My last roommate and I lived together for 4 years," she told me, her eyes never leaving mine. "We only parted because I got the job offer here." I signed the agreement that day. She moved in the following weekend with surprisingly few possessions, just 2 suitcases and a small box of kitchen items. "I'm minimalist," she explained when I commented on it. "Makes moving easier." The first month was perfect. Megan was clean, quiet, and kept to herself. Our schedules complemented each other. She worked day shifts at the hospital while I worked evenings at the bar. We passed like ships in the night, exchanging brief pleasantries in the kitchen as one of us was heading out while the other was coming home. It started with small things. A coffee mug in the sink I was certain I'd put in the dishwasher. The thermostat adjusted 2 degrees cooler than I kept it. The bathroom door left open when I always closed it. Then came the night I heard her talking in her room at 3 a.m. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. People have phone calls, except I distinctly heard her laugh at something, followed by another laugh that sounded identical. Same pitch, same duration, same slight catch at the end. I pressed my ear against the wall but couldn't make out the words. The next morning, I casually mentioned it. "Were you on the phone late last night? The walls are pretty thin." Megan looked up from her yogurt, her expression blank. "I was asleep by 10. I had an early shift." "Oh?" I said, confused. "I thought I heard voices from your room." Something flickered across her face, annoyance, maybe concern, before she smiled. "Must have been from outside. The couple next door argues sometimes." I nodded, though our neighbors were an elderly man and his adult son. That weekend, I came home early from a cancelled shift to find Megan in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. She wore a blue sweater I hadn't seen before. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. "Thought you were working today." She turned, knife still in hand. For a split second, her eyes widened in what looked like panic. "Got off early," she said, her voice slightly higher than usual. "Making stir-fry. Want some?" I declined and retreated to my room, unable to shake the strange tension that had filled the kitchen. Later that night, I heard the front door open and close. Curious, I peeked out my bedroom door to see Megan walking in, wearing scrubs and looking exhausted. "Tough shift?" I asked. She jumped, hand flying to her chest. "Jesus, Alex, you scared me." "Sorry," I said. "Didn't mean to." She kicked off her shoes and hung her jacket on the hook next to the one that was already there, an identical jacket. "Weren't you home earlier?" I asked carefully. "Making stir-fry?" Megan frowned. No, I've been at work since 6 this morning. 12-hour shift. I felt a cold wave wash over me. Someone was here. Using your knife. Wearing a blue sweater. She looked exactly like you. Megan's face drained of color. She pulled out her phone and quickly tapped out a text message. We need to talk, she said after a moment, her voice tight. But not right now. I need to shower first. She disappeared into the bathroom, leaving me standing in the hallway, confusion mixing with the first tendrils of fear. 20 minutes later, she emerged in pajamas, her wet hair wrapped in a towel. Let's sit down, she said, gesturing to the couch. I perched on the edge, watching as she paced back and forth. I have a twin sister, she finally said. Her name is Maddie. You never mentioned a sister, I replied. Let alone a twin. Megan sighed. Because Maddie is complicated. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when we were teenagers. She struggled with it for years. And she was here today? In our apartment? Megan nodded, not meeting my eyes. I gave her the spare key for emergencies. She must have come by while I was at work. Without telling you? Like I said, it's complicated. She recently moved to Portland too. She's been having a hard time finding her own place. She finally looked up at me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was afraid you wouldn't rent to me if you knew about her. The explanation made sense, but something felt off. Does she come here often when you're not home? No, Megan said quickly. This is the first time. I'll talk to her about boundaries. I wanted to believe her. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of the 2 identical laughs coming from her room weeks earlier. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Megan's schedule seemed inconsistent. Sometimes she mentioned having worked a shift that I was certain she'd been home during. Her style of dress would change subtly midday, from loose cardigans to fitted blouses. Even her manner of speaking shifted. Sometimes she was reserved and soft-spoken, other times more animated and direct. I began documenting these inconsistencies in a note on my phone, telling myself I wasn't losing my mind. Then I found the pills. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. A water glass had tipped over in the kitchen, soaking through to the drawer below. As I was drying everything, I found an orange prescription bottle pushed to the back. The label read, Clozapine, take 1 tablet twice daily. The patient name, Megan Haywood. A quick internet search told me clozapine was an antipsychotic, primarily used for treatment-resistant schizophrenia. Not borderline personality disorder. That night, I heard the voices again. Not just 2 this time, but what sounded like an argument. Megan's voice at different pitches, sometimes overlapping. I recorded it on my phone, my hand shaking. The next morning, I waited until Megan left for work, then called OHSU Hospital. Hi, I'm trying to reach Nurse Haywood, I said when the operator answered. Megan Haywood in pediatrics. I'm sorry, the woman replied after checking. We don't have anyone by that name working here. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? She's been there since January. I'm looking at the current staff directory for all departments. The operator said. There's no Megan Haywood. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. Who had I been living with for the past 2 months? That evening, I confronted her as soon as she walked through the door. You don't work at OHSU, I said without preamble. I called. Megan froze, her keys still in the lock. Alex. Who are you? Really? She closed the door slowly and leaned against it. I do work in healthcare. Just not at OHSU. That's not what this is about, and you know it, I said, my voice rising. There is no twin sister, is there? It's just you. I found your medication. Her posture changed instantly, shoulders squaring, chin lifting. When she spoke again, her voice had a harder edge. Megan doesn't like conflict. That's why I'm here now. A chill ran through me. What are you talking about? Who's I? Maddie, she said simply. Though that's not exactly right either. There is no Maddie, not physically. There's just Megan, and me, and sometimes others. My mind raced to process what she was saying. Dissociative identity disorder. I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. She, Maddie, nodded. Very good. Most people guess schizophrenia, which is incorrect. How many of you are there? I asked, my mouth dry. That's complicated, she replied, walking past me to the kitchen. She moved differently now, more confident, less contained. Megan is the host, the original. I'm the protector. There are others, but they don't front as often. Front? Take control of the body, she explained, pulling a wineglass from the cabinet. Something Megan never did, she didn't drink. Megan handles work, daily life. I handle difficult situations. Like this conversation. She poured a generous amount of my Cabernet. Exactly. Why lie on the rental application? About OHSU? She sipped the wine. Megan works at a private mental health clinic. We find people are judgmental when they learn a mental health worker has mental health issues themselves. Ironic, isn't it? My head was spinning. And the twin story? A convenient explanation for when transitions happen unexpectedly. Most people don't notice the differences between us. You're unusually observant. She studied me over the rim of her glass. Most roommates don't catalog each other's behaviors the way you do. The accusation in her tone made me defensive. I noticed because things in my apartment kept changing. Personal items moved. Ah. She nodded. That would be Lily. She's 12, very curious. Poor boundaries. The casual way she referred to another personality, a child, inside her sent a wave of unease through me. I don't think this is going to work out, I said carefully. The roommate situation. Because Megan has did? Her eyes narrowed. That's discrimination? Because you lied? All of you. 4 months. She set down the wineglass with deliberate slowness. We need this apartment, Alex. The stability. The routine. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing. I just can't. Something dark passed behind her eyes. You don't understand what happens when our life gets disrupted. Are you threatening me? Warning you, she corrected. Transitions become unpredictable during stress. New alters can emerge. Ones even I don't know how to control. I took a step back. I want you out by the end of the month. She laughed, a sound nothing like Megan's gentle chuckle. We're on the lease. Legally, you can't evict us without cause. Lying on the rental application is cause. Prove it, she challenged. Prove any of this. Your word against ours. She tapped her temple. And there are more of us than there are of you. That night, I double-locked my bedroom door and pushed my dresser in front of it. I lay awake for hours, listening to the murmur of voices from her room, sometimes argumentative, sometimes soothing, all in different variations of the same voice. In the morning, I woke to find Megan, or someone who looked like her, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee waiting for me. I owe you an apology, she said softly. The gentle Megan again, or so it seemed. Maddie shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I remained standing, keeping the counter between us. I meant what I said. This isn't working. I understand, she said, looking down at her hands. We'll start looking for a new place. But it might take time, especially with... She gestured vaguely at herself. Fine. But I need some ground rules until then. She nodded eagerly. No entering my room. Ever. No using my personal items. And I need to know who I'm talking to. No more pretending. That's fair, she said. Though sometimes even we don't know who's fronting. Over the next few weeks, an uneasy truce settled over the apartment. Sometimes I'd come home to find a note signed by a name I didn't recognize, Clay or Lily or Beth, explaining who was fronting that day. Megan, the host, seemed to be present less and less. Then my things started disappearing. Small items at first, a pair of earrings, a fountain pen. Then my passport. My birth certificate. pages torn from my journal. When I confronted her, it was always the same: confusion, denial, then blame shifted to one of the others. It must have been Lily. Or, Clay gets paranoid sometimes. I installed a lock on my bedroom door, but items still vanished. I set up a small camera, only to find it smashed the next day with no explanation. One night, I woke to find my bedroom door open, though I'd locked it before sleeping. A figure stood in the doorway, Megan's silhouette backlit by the hallway light. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice choked with fear. "You were crying out," she said, her voice unfamiliar. "Not Megan, not Maddie. Someone new. Having a nightmare." "I wasn't," I said, certain of it. "Get out." She didn't move. "We've been watching you sleep for weeks," she said in a childlike sing-song. "You never notice." I fumbled for my phone, ready to call 911, but it wasn't on my nightstand. "Looking for this?" She held up my phone. "Clay thought you might be recording us. He doesn't like that." "Get out of my room," I repeated, louder this time. "Now." She tilted her head. "There are so many of us now," she whispered. "More every day. And only one of you." I slept at a friend's that night and the next. When I finally returned to the apartment 3 days later, Megan was gone. All her belongings had vanished as if she'd never been there. No note, no forwarding address, nothing but an empty room. Relief washed over me, until I noticed my laptop open on the coffee table. A document was up on the screen, a letter addressed to my landlord, typed in perfect imitation of my writing style. It detailed concerns about my mental health, mentioned hearing voices, and requested information about breaking my lease due to an upcoming voluntary commitment to a psychiatric facility. It was dated 3 days in the future and signed with my name. In my bedroom, I found empty bottles of my shampoo filled with bleach. In the kitchen, my food had been rearranged, some packages subtly opened and resealed. And on my pillow lay my missing passport, each page systematically defaced with tiny, meticulous handwriting in what looked like my own penmanship. The same message repeated hundreds of times. "We are many. You are one. We can be you better than you can." I moved out that night, leaving everything behind. Changed my phone number, my email, my social media. Started over in a different city under a different name. But sometimes, I still check the mirror just to make sure the person looking back is really me. Because the most terrifying part isn't that Megan and her alters might find me again. It's that I'll never know for certain if they already have. The buzzing started 3 weeks after Tyler moved in. A persistent, mechanical hum that vibrated through our shared wall, just loud enough to notice, just quiet enough to make me doubt my own hearing. It always began after midnight and continued until dawn, perfectly timed to the hours I needed most for sleep. "Audio equipment," Tyler had explained when I finally asked, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "I'm recording a podcast about modern scientific breakthroughs. The acoustics are better at night." I believed him because I wanted to. Because Tyler was, on paper, the perfect roommate, a third-year biochemistry PhD student who paid his rent early, cleaned meticulously, and barely seemed to use the common areas. In the brutal San Francisco housing market, finding someone who could consistently make rent was more valuable than uninterrupted sleep. So I bought earplugs and downloaded a white noise app. I adjusted. The human capacity for adaptation is remarkable that way. We normalize the abnormal rather than confront it. It would take 2 more months and the persistent smell of chemicals for me to reconsider that decision. It began as a faint, medicinal odor, like rubbing alcohol but sharper. I noticed it first in the bathroom we shared, then in the hallway, and eventually throughout the entire apartment. When I brought it up to Tyler, he blamed it on a spilled bottle of cologne. "Sorry about that," he said, his words rushed. "I'll air out my room better." But the smell persisted, and Tyler's behavior shifted. He installed a deadbolt on his bedroom door. "Protecting research materials," he claimed, and began receiving packages daily, some in refrigerated containers marked with biohazard symbols that he insisted were just standard labeling for research chemicals. I might have continued making excuses for him had I not lost power to my bedroom one night. The circuit breaker had tripped, overloaded by whatever Tyler was running in his room. When I knocked on his door at 2 a.m. to tell him, he opened it just enough to show his face. Behind him, blue-white light spilled out, illuminating the surgical mask hanging around his neck. "Sorry about that," he said, the same phrase he always used, devoid of actual remorse. "I'll fix it." As he slipped out to reset the breaker, I caught a glimpse inside. Metal shelving lined with laboratory equipment, a centrifuge, what looked like an incubator, and rows of petri dishes. This was no podcast studio. The next day, I waited until Tyler left for campus before trying his door. The new deadbolt held firm. I considered calling the landlord but hesitated. What exactly would I report? That my roommate was conducting some kind of research in his room? That wasn't illegal. Unusual, certainly, but not inherently dangerous. So instead, I started paying closer attention. I noted when packages arrived and what was written on them. I tracked the power outages. I documented the changing smells, sometimes chemical, sometimes organic and rot adjacent. And I began to notice other things too, like how Tyler would leave at odd hours carrying a small cooler, or how he began wearing long sleeves despite the summer heat, or the bandages I occasionally glimpsed on his forearms. One night, half asleep and stumbling to the bathroom, I encountered Tyler in the hallway, wearing nitrile gloves and carrying what looked like a medical waste container. "Just some contaminated materials," he explained, seeing my questioning gaze. "Nothing dangerous." But something in his tone made the hair on my arms stand up. The way he said dangerous, like he was intimately familiar with the concept. The next morning, I found tiny drops of blood on the bathroom sink. They had spattered in a pattern consistent with an injection. I recognized it from when my diabetic father would check his glucose. But Tyler wasn't diabetic. I'd seen him eat enough sugary cereal to be certain of that. A rational person would have moved out, would have terminated the lease, found a new place, even temporarily crashed with friends. But San Francisco rents had climbed another 12% since Tyler moved in, and my teacher's salary hadn't. I was trapped by economics, by inertia, and increasingly, by curiosity. What exactly was my roommate doing in there? The answer started to materialize when the university's security office called our apartment. Tyler wasn't home, and I answered. "This is Officer Delgado from UCSF Security," a deep voice said. "We're trying to reach Tyler Marston about some missing laboratory equipment and supplies." My pulse quickened. "What kind of equipment?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss that," Delgado replied. "But it's important we speak with him as soon as possible." When I told Tyler about the call, his face drained of color. That night the buzzing from his room grew louder, more frantic. The next morning, our kitchen trash was filled with broken glass and torn papers. The deadbolt on his door had been reinforced. I should have called the police. That's what I tell myself now, what anyone would say in hindsight. But the truth is more complicated. Tyler hadn't threatened me. He hadn't done anything overtly illegal that I could prove. And a small, terrible part of me wanted to see how far this would go, the same impulse that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. The tipping point came when I found the notebook. Tyler had left it on the kitchen counter while making coffee, breaking his usual vigilance. The cover read, "Subject Response Log," in his precise handwriting. I managed to snap several photos with my phone before he returned, cursing himself for the lapse. Later, alone in my room, I examined the images. Most pages contained tables of data, timestamps, measurements, one-word observations like inflammation, necrosis, antibody response. Clinical, detached, scientific. But it was the header at the top of each page that made my blood run cold. Auto-experimentation Protocol 17B, Viral Vector Gene Therapy for Enhanced Cellular Regeneration. Tyler wasn't just conducting unauthorized research. He was experimenting on himself. That night, I finally confronted him. "I know what you're doing," I said when he emerged from his room for his nightly trip to the kitchen. You're running some kind of genetic experiments on yourself. He froze, water glass halfway to his lips. For a moment, he seemed to consider denial, then his shoulders slumped. You don't understand what's at stake, he said finally. Then explain it to me. He studied me, calculating. The University Ethics Board rejected my research proposal. Said it was premature for human trials. Bitterness seeped into his voice. Do you know how many potential treatments never make it to patients because of institutional caution? People are dying while bureaucrats debate whether a therapy is too risky to test. So you decided to test it on yourself, I said. That's why UCSF security is looking for you. You stole equipment. Borrowed, he corrected. And yes, I'm the test subject. Perfectly ethical. I've consented to all procedures. What exactly are you testing? Something like pride flickered across his face. A viral delivery system for gene editing. Targeted cellular regeneration. Imagine wounds healing in days instead of weeks. Organs repairing themselves after injury. It sounded miraculous. It also sounded dangerous as hell. If it's so promising, why was it rejected? Tyler's expression darkened. Politics. Risk aversion. My advisor taking credit for my work, then deciding it was too volatile once he understood what I'd created. I wasn't convinced. And the results so far? Promising, he said, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a patchwork of healing incisions. This one is 10 days old. Should still have stitches, but it's already closed. The wound looked strange. Healed, yes, but the surrounding skin mottled and discolored. Something wasn't right. What about side effects? His hesitation told me everything. Manageable, he said finally. Some immune response issues. Nothing I can't handle. Over the next week, Tyler's condition deteriorated rapidly. The buzzing from his room became erratic, stopping and starting at odd intervals. The smell changed too, less chemical, more biological. Like something rotting. Twice I heard him vomiting violently in our shared bathroom. When I passed him in the hallway, I noticed his skin had developed a yellowish tinge. His eyes were bloodshot, with disturbingly enlarged pupils. He moved stiffly, as though in constant pain. You need medical help, I told him. No hospitals, he snapped. They wouldn't understand. They'd try to stop it before the process completes. What process? Tyler, whatever you've done to yourself is making you sick. It gets worse before it gets better, he insisted. The immune response is just the transition phase. My body is fighting the changes, but it will adapt. That night, the sounds from his room changed from mechanical buzzing to something wet and organic, like the sound of meat being tenderized. I pressed my ear against our shared wall and heard ragged breathing punctuated by soft whimpers. I called campus security the next morning, but they merely took a report. Without evidence of immediate danger, they wouldn't intervene. The same with SFPD when I tried them next. Sounds like your roommate is working on a project, the officer said dismissively. Not exactly a police matter. I considered reaching out to Tyler's department, but realized I didn't even know his advisor's name. Tyler had systematically isolated himself from everyone who might notice what he was doing. Everyone except me. After 3 days without seeing Tyler emerge from his room, I made a decision. I picked the lock on his door, a skill left over from a misspent adolescence, and pushed it open. The smell hit me first, copper and rot and something else, something chemical and wrong. The room had been transformed into a full laboratory setup, with the bed pushed against the wall to make space for the equipment. And 4 stands stood in the corner, bags of cloudy fluid hanging from its hooks. And there was Tyler, unconscious on the floor. His skin was mottled with strange, raised patches, almost scale-like in texture. The veins visible through his pale skin pulsed with an odd rhythm, too fast and then too slow. Beside him lay a syringe and a notebook, open to a page filled with increasingly erratic handwriting. Day 47, regeneration rate exceeding expectations. Immune suppression failing. Unexpected protein expression in epidermal cells. Day 48, Fever 104.2 degrees. Hallucinations beginning. Worth it if it works. Day 49. Something wrong with the vector. Replication not stopping as designed. Countermeasures prepared if necessary. The final entry was barely legible, written with a shaking hand. DNA and RNA sequencing shows unexpected integration. Becoming something new. Not failure. Evolution? I called 911. The hazmat team arrived first, followed by ambulances, police, and eventually men in unmarked cars who evacuated our entire building. Tyler was taken away in an isolation unit. I spent 12 hours being questioned by various agencies, followed by 2 weeks in medical quarantine. They told me Tyler had created a novel viral vector for genetic modification, one designed to override the body's natural rejection of foreign DNA. But his creation had mutated, becoming something his models hadn't predicted. The virus had begun rewriting his DNA in unexpected ways, triggering cascading cellular changes. Is he going to be okay? I asked the CDC representative during my final debriefing. She hesitated. Mr. Marston is stable, she said carefully. But the genetic modifications he subjected himself to were extensive. Some appear to be permanent. They never clarified what permanent meant. The non-disclosure agreement they made me sign prevented me from asking follow-up questions, from speaking to reporters, even from discussing the incident with other residents of our building. 6 months later, I received a letter addressed in unfamiliar handwriting but signed with Tyler's name. Inside was a single page torn from a notebook. The modification succeeded. It read. Not as intended, but perhaps better. They're keeping me in a research facility. Studying me. Ironic, isn't it? My work will revolutionize medicine after all, just with me as the unwilling specimen rather than the celebrated pioneer. The regeneration continues, too rapidly now. I am becoming less recognizable each day. But my mind remains. For now. They're watching me write this, but they'll let me send it. A small courtesy. They think you deserve some closure. What they don't know is that the vector isn't contained. It never was. Check your blood work from quarantine. Elevated white cell count? Unusual protein markers? They missed what matters. You were exposed too. Not as directly as me, but enough. The changes will be slower, subtler. You might not notice for years. But one day, you'll realize you heal faster than you should. That your reflection doesn't quite match your memory of yourself. And you'll understand what we've begun. I'm sorry. And you're welcome. I burned the letter. I tell myself Tyler was delusional, that quarantine would have caught any contamination, that the nightmares I have, of my skin hardening, of my bones shifting beneath it, are just psychological trauma. But sometimes, when I cut myself cooking or scrape my knee, I watch the wound too carefully. And I can't help but notice that each time, it seems to heal just a little bit faster than before. I found the first notebook by accident. When I rolled back in Eliza's desk chair, I bumped her nightstand, knocking several black moleskins onto our dorm floor. One landed open, and I saw my name at the top of the page. Beneath it, in Eliza's meticulous handwriting. October 14th. Subject retired at 23:47. Light breathing established at 0:12. First REM cycle observed 0:58 to 1:32. Woke briefly at 3:24 bathroom. Returned to sleep at 3:29. Final waking, 7:15. Total sleep duration, 6 hours, 51 minutes. Notes: Subject continues to display inefficient sleep architecture. Minimal sleep talking tonight. Only phrase captured. Not there yet. A record of my sleep from 3 nights earlier, detailed down to the minute. The word subject, written clinically. And sleep talking? I had no idea I talked in my sleep. I flipped through the notebook, my heart pounding. Pages of similar entries dating back to August when Eliza and I became roommates at Pembroke University. August 30th. Subject displays unusual nocturnal restlessness. 17 position changes logged between 2 to 3 a.m. Evidence of nightmare from 3:42 to 4:15. Spoke clearly at 4:12. They're still watching. Potential research significance. High. September 7th. Subject achieved REM sleep unusually quickly tonight. Sleepwalking incident at 2:37. Subject stood beside own bed for approximately 3 minutes before returning to sleep. Facial expression during episode, vacant but distressed. I felt violated. How was Eliza documenting my sleep patterns with such precision? The sound of a key in the door sent me scrambling. I shoved the notebooks back and wheeled her chair to her desk as Eliza walked in. "Hey," she said, smiling like always, slightly awkward but friendly. Nothing in her round face or behind her thick-framed glasses suggested someone who spent her nights watching me sleep. "Using my chair? Mine's broken," I managed to reply. That night, I pretended to fall asleep but kept my eyes cracked open. For the first hour, Eliza worked on her laptop, occasionally glancing at me. But at midnight, she quietly opened her bedside drawer and took out one of the black notebooks. For 20 minutes, she simply sat watching me and taking notes. Once, she stood over my bed for a full minute before returning to her side. The next morning, I searched her name online with keywords like sleep study and sleep research. The results stopped me cold. Riverside Hospital's psychiatric unit celebrates Young Scholar Award winner, and there was Eliza accepting a certificate for research on predictive markers in pre-symptomatic parasomnia patients. Further searches revealed more connections. Eliza had co-authored a paper titled Nocturnal Vocalization as an Early Indicator of Psychotic Break, and worked with the Hartley Center for Sleep and Neuropsychiatric Research, a facility shut down following ethics violations related to non-consensual observation and experimental approach to psychiatric diagnosis. Was Eliza continuing unauthorized research on me? That evening, as I was leaving to stay at my boyfriend's place, Eliza froze me with a casual remark. "You said the strangest thing in your sleep last night. Something about notebooks and watching." "I don't talk in my sleep," I said. "Everyone does sometimes," she replied. "Most people just don't remember." "What else have I said?" I asked, unable to help myself. Eliza smiled slightly. "Would you like to know? I've been keeping track. It's fascinating, really, the subconscious mind revealing itself when the conscious mind is switched off." The clinical detachment in her voice made my skin crawl. "Why would you track what I say in my sleep?" "Professional curiosity," she said. "You're an excellent subject. Your sleep architecture is remarkably inconsistent." "Subject," I repeated. "That's what you call me in your notebooks. You looked through my research journals. They were on the floor." "They were in my drawer," she corrected calmly. "I always keep them in my drawer." I felt a chill. I distinctly remembered the notebooks on her nightstand. Was she gaslighting me? "I have to go," I said. "Your nightmares are getting worse," Eliza called after me. "Whatever you're running from, it's catching up to you." The next day, the housing office denied my room change request. No vacancies mid-semester unless I had evidence of threatening behavior. Did I have evidence? The notebooks were clearly an invasion of privacy, but was it harassment? That evening, I confronted Eliza. "The notebooks, the sleep observations, it needs to stop. It's a violation of my privacy. I understand why you're upset. But my research is important, more important than you realize." "What research? What are you looking for?" "Patterns. Linguistic markers. Early signs of neurological deterioration." "You think I'm deteriorating neurologically?" "Everyone is, in a sense," she said. "The question is velocity and trajectory. I'm not your lab rat, Eliza." "No," she agreed. "You're much more valuable than that. Do you know how rare it is to find someone with your particular parasomnia profile? I want you to destroy those notebooks and stop watching me sleep." "I can't do that." "Then I'll report you to the University Ethics Board." Something flickered across her face, concern finally. "That would be unwise. For both of us." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm contextualizing," she said. My research isn't just academic. It's preventative. Preventative of what? She leaned forward. 5 weeks ago, you said something in your sleep. You said I can't keep covering for her. 2 nights later you said, no one can ever know what happened at the lake. I felt the blood drain from my face. The lake. I'd never told anyone about the lake. What else? I whispered. Last week, if they find the car, they'll know it was me. And 3 nights ago, I didn't mean to hurt her. My legs gave out. Those words, my most hidden thoughts, spoken aloud in my sleep and catalogued by this stranger. Who else knows? I asked. No one, Eliza said. Yet. What do you want? To continue my research. Your cooperation. And eventually, a full account of what happened at the lake. That night, I lay awake, aware of Eliza watching me, her notebook open on her lap. I stared at the ceiling, remembering the weight of the car as it slipped beneath the black water. My sister's boyfriend's face as he realized what I'd done. The flimsy explanation I'd given police about his disappearance. For weeks, we maintained an uneasy détente. I stopped fighting the sleep documentation, and Eliza shared snippets of what she learned. You mentioned someone named Marcus last night, she might say over breakfast. Is he significant? And I would feel the noose tighten. I began to wonder if I could solve this problem the same way I'd solved my sister's problem. Plan it carefully. Make it look like an accident. But Eliza was always one step ahead. I've taken precautions, she told me one evening. Everything I've documented is backed up and programmed to release to certain parties if I don't check in regularly. I started staying awake as long as possible, fighting sleep. But sleep deprivation led to more talking, more revealing fragments from my subconscious. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke suddenly at 3 a.m. to find Eliza standing over my bed with a small recording device. What are you doing? I demanded. You were speaking so clearly, she said. I needed to capture it precisely. Turn that off. I sat up, reaching for it. She stepped back. You said a name I haven't heard before. Rebecca. Who is Rebecca? The name hit me like a physical blow. Give me the recorder, Eliza. She played it back. My voice, distorted by sleep but unmistakably mine, filled the room. Rebecca knows. She saw everything. She was there that night. She knows what I did to Marcus. I grabbed the recorder and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered. That won't help, Eliza said calmly. It's already backed up to my cloud storage. I want to see everything, I demanded. All your notes, all the recordings. To my surprise, she agreed. For the next hour, I read through notebook after notebook, listened to fragment after fragment of my sleeping self revealing my darkest secret. The story emerged in pieces. I had been at the lake that night. I had argued with Marcus. I had watched the car sink. And Rebecca had been there too. Who is Rebecca? Eliza asked again. I don't know, I whispered truthfully. I don't remember anyone named Rebecca being there. But your subconscious does, Eliza said, her eyes bright. That's the breakthrough. You've created a compartmentalized memory, a dissociative response to trauma. She leaned forward eagerly. Who is Rebecca, Sarah? Is she a part of you? The question opened doors I had kept locked for years. Memories flooded back, not of the lake, but of hospital rooms. Medication. Therapy sessions where doctors asked about the others. Oh God, I breathed. You know, don't you? You've known from the beginning. Eliza nodded. Your case file was at Hartley before they shut down. Did with at least 2 confirmed alter personalities. Rebecca was documented as the protective one. She hesitated. I believe she was the one at the lake that night, not you. You engineered this whole thing. Getting assigned as my roommate, watching me sleep, this was never about sleep research. It was, she insisted. Just not the kind I led you to believe. I'm studying how alter personalities manifest during different sleep cycles. Your case is the cornerstone of my thesis. You've been triggering me, I realized. Deliberately. Pushing me to switch. Observing, she corrected. I never actively triggered anything. But we both knew that was a lie. What happens now? I asked. That depends on all of you. My research is nearly complete, but I still need to document a full transition during REM sleep. And if I refuse? Then Rebecca might decide to share what happened at the lake with the authorities. That night I didn't fight sleep. I welcomed it, knowing Eliza was watching, waiting for Rebecca to emerge. But it wasn't Rebecca who woke in my body at 3:17 a.m. I know this because I've read Eliza's final notebook entry. Subject exhibited unusual delta wave patterns preceding sudden waking at 3:17. Pupillary response and facial microexpressions suggest emergence of previously undocumented alter personality. Subject identified herself as Natalie. No prior record of this identity in Hartley files. Subject displayed calm affect but hostile intent. Terminating observation and implementing emergency protocols. Audio file attached. The attached audio file is just 11 seconds long. Hello, Eliza. I'm Natalie. I know what you've been doing to Sarah. And Rebecca wanted me to tell you, there's always room for one more at the bottom of the lake. The file ends with the sound of footsteps approaching. Eliza requested an emergency room transfer the next morning. The housing administrator approved it immediately, noting her visible distress and concerns for personal safety. I found her notebooks in the trash outside our building, every page torn out except the final entry. I don't know what happened to the recordings. Sometimes I wake with mud under my fingernails and gaps in my memory. I've started keeping my own sleep journal, documenting the nights I lose. And I wonder about Natalie, this new protector I've apparently created, and what exactly she meant by her threat. Because the truth is, I still don't remember what happened at the lake. But I think Natalie does. And I think Eliza does too, wherever she is now. I just hope, for her sake, that she's learned to sleep with her eyes open. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.